The wind off the northern sea scraped mournful songs along the backs of those who remained. In the half-dark, Hrothr knelt in the blackened ring of the hearth, his hands cupped around a shard of his mother's clay amulet. It bore the shape of a fox, a spirit of cunning, but its edges were rough, broken by the raiders' axes. Few survived the night. Hrothr's home, Reynafjell, built between sharp cliffs and aurora-lit forests, had burned. Only the bones of the great hall, ghostly and charred, were left to witness his grief. Snow fell heavy, hiding blood and twisted beams, but not the emptiness clawing at his chest. He did not weep. His father always said tears were for the living, not for the dead. Yet his arms shook as he built 3 markers from stone and ice. Svanna, his sister, had vanished in the chaos. Their father's shield splintered at the door, the blade snapped clean in two. Of his mother, there was nothing save the clay fox and a song that clung to memory like mist. "You have lost," said the old woman who walked the shore, her steps silent on snow. Her name was Gertrude, and she had dwelled there longer than the pines. Silver runes twisted up her staff. But the gods weave loss and fate in a single thread. Hrothr rose and faced her, holding the fox. "Why, if they watch with such power, do they let this happen?" Gertrude gazed past him, eyes clouded with centuries. "The gods have their wars. Mortals endure their storms. Yet loss is seed and soil for every tale worth telling." He wanted to argue, but a cry echoed from the cliff's edge. A child, half-starved and wild-haired, his neighbor's boy, Vilmer. Hrothr ran to him, scooping the boy into his cloak. Vilmer clung to him, body shaking. "There are ghosts in the trees," Vilmer whispered, "and the earth is hollow beneath their feet." In the weeks that followed, Hrothr became caretaker of the broken. With Gertrude's guidance, he gathered the orphaned, the wounded, the wanderers from fire-whitened fields. He built them shelter from driftwood and stone, stitched together what food remained, gnawed old stories into life at night to chase away despair. All the while, dreams haunted him. He saw Svanna, alive, but wrapped in shadow, her breath clothed in frost, standing beside a wolf with 3 eyes. His father's spirit rode a ship woven from bones, steering ever north into impossible ice. When the pale moon rose, Gertrude taught him the runes, the ways to speak to wind and water, the ways to read omens in ash and bone. She told him a prophecy, old as the sea: those who endure great loss will one day walk the boundary between worlds. Hrothr began to hope, not for the return of what was lost, but for the meaning that loss might carve into the world. One blue-black night, as auroras shivered overhead, Gertrude showed him the hidden path beyond the grave mounds. "Here, the veil thins. You must go, Hrothr. Grief is only the beginning." He left before dawn, the fox talisman warm against his chest, Vilmer at his side, and the spirits of Reynafjell whispering in the wind. This was only the beginning of the saga, the journey through the other world, the bargains with gods and monsters, the memories capable of reshaping fate itself. For in the north, loss was neither ending nor curse. It was the soil from which new legends grew. The snow grew deeper as Hrothr and Vilmer climbed through the tangled woods beyond Reynafjell. Branches caught at their cloaks, heavy with ice that crackled in the wind. Vilmer walked in silence, his eyes wide, scanning each flicker at the edge of sight. Sometimes he whispered to himself, reciting the names of those lost in the raid as if he could anchor himself in memory. They came to a brook frozen smooth and clear. In its depths, shadows writhed, moving against currents Hrothr could not see. Gertrude's runes burned faintly in his mind, advice echoing. "Water remembers everything. Ask it for truth." Hrothr knelt and pressed his palm to the ice. "Spirit of stream and stone, where's my sister? Where do the lost go?" The darkness below the ice rippled, and the voice of water drifted to his ears, older than language, heavy with sorrow. "The lost are not gone. They walk the roads of Hell's realm, the world between worlds. She waits by the tree of bones, given a riddle to solve before morning." Vilmer tugged at Hrothr's sleeve. "Do you know the riddle?" Hrothr shook his head. "If we can find the tree, perhaps we can help her." At dusk, the woods thinned, and the earth rose into barrow mounds. Mist curled in unnatural shapes, and the wind carried snatches of ancient songs: hunger, lament, hope. Hrother led Vilmer in quiet, careful steps. Each grave was marked with stones. Some bore runes for peace, others curses for vengeance. A wolf with 3 eyes appeared on a mound, eyes aglow like embers, for silvered with ash. It regarded the boys with uncanny intelligence and spoke in a voice as deep as the roots of mountains. You seek the boundary. To pass, offer what you value most. Hrother's fingers curled around the fox amulet. Its warmth reminded him of his mother, her fierce laughter, her stories by lamplight. He bowed and set the fox on the ground before the wolf. I offer this, he said, voice taut with longing and dread. The wolf stepped forward and sniffed the amulet, then threw back its head and howled a song piercing enough to split the night. The mist parted, revealing a path shaped of bones, winding deeper into trees older than time. Vilmer clung to Hrother as they walked the path. The air grew colder, and with each step, the line between worlds faded. From the mist emerged shapes both beautiful and terrible, Odin's ravens, one-eyed, words like thunder, Norns weaving new threads from their endless loom, and Hel herself, half living, half dead, her gaze as empty as eternity. Solve the riddle, Hel whispered. A tree stood behind her, branches white, bones hanging in the wind. Svanna was there, her form flickering like candlelight. She gazed at her brother, tears shining. The riddle, her voice was thin. How do you end a story built on loss? Hrother understood without speaking further. He turned to Hel, folded his pain into words. You end it with hope, with a promise, with the living choosing to remember and to build anew. Hel's mouth quirked. She nodded, her hand passing through the tree's canopy. Correct. Those who carry hope walk free. With Vilmer and Svanna at his side, Hrother retraced his steps along the bone path, the 3-eyed wolf disappearing into midnight. The mists receded, the barrow mounds silent behind them. Above, dawn broke across Reynafjell, gentle and forgiving. But in the song of wind, Hrother knew their journey was not finished. Sometimes loss was a road. Sometimes it was the key that opened every new beginning. Thus, the saga pressed onward, into lands yet unwritten, toward gods yet unmet, guided by the memory of sorrow and the fierce promise of hope. The returning sun painted the snow pink and gold as Hrother, Svanna, and Vilmer descended from the mists. The village, what was left of it, stood silent, shadows of the past lingering between the scorched beams. They paused on the ridge, hearts beating in unison, uncertain whether home would ever be home again. Hrother's heart carried a new kind of weight, not only grief, but the memory of Hel's realm, and the knowledge that hope was fragile and must be tended as carefully as fire. Svanna walked beside him, changed by her passage between worlds, her gaze both sharper and sadder. Vilmer, still whispering names, seemed lighter, every step a small defiance of the darkness that once claimed him. They spent the night beneath the stars, uncertain of where to begin. Gertrude found them in the morning, staff glinting with frost. She listened to their tale and nodded. You've crossed the threshold and returned. Few do so and remain whole. But the gods are still restless, and loss leaves roots that wind deep. At Gertrude's urging, they set about rebuilding. Hrother shaped new beams from fallen trees, Svanna patched walls with stone and lichen, and Vilmer cleared debris, teaching songs to children who had lost their voices. Days passed slowly, a new hearth was built, and light flickered in every window. But with hope came the hum of something darker. Ravens circled at dusk, and the wind carried voices from far away, warnings and fragments of old prophecy. One evening, as mist crept along the ground, Hrother found a bundle left on the doorstep, a leather pouch filled with unfamiliar seeds and a scrap of cloth embroidered with a runic symbol for journey. Gertrude examined the seeds, frowning. These are not of our land. Some soul, god, or wanderer calls you onward again. Perhaps the gods mean to test the promise you made in Hel's realm. Dreams returned to Hrother, vivid and urgent. He saw himself walking a path that split in 7 directions, each leading to a different fate. A golden hall, a battlefield stained with tears, a forest of endless night, a roaring sea, a mountain pierced by lightning, a valley filled with laughter, and a circle of stones where voices sang of forgiveness. In each dream, the fox talisman reappeared, whole, burning bright with its own light. Each path hinted that only by sharing their story, by opening their hearts to others who wandered lost, would they truly end the cycle begun in fire and grief. On the night of the first thaw, Hrothgar called the villagers together and shared everything. The journey to Hell's realm, the riddle solved, the hope discovered beyond despair. Svanna and Vilmer added their voices, and the people listened, some weeping quietly, some laughing at last. That night, as stories flowed from one soul to another, the seeds from the pouch were planted by the new hearth. By dawn, tiny shoots broke ground, root and leaf weaving together. The gods, perhaps, watched from afar, their interest caught by mortals who had learned to hold on even when the world seemed to end. The saga grew with each telling, every heart it touched echoing the truth. Loss was only the beginning, and it was in the sharing of sorrow and of hope that new worlds came into being. There would be new journeys and new tests, but for now, in Reynafjell, the story belonged to all who carried it forward. And so, Hrothgar, Svanna, Vilmer, and those that remained stepped into the dawn, never alone, weaving their pain, their strength, and their dreams into the shape of a life rebuilt. Spring swept over Reynafjell with restless energy. Shoots and buds brightened the scorched ground, filling the air with new scents and promise. Hrothgar, Svanna, and Vilmer tended the seedlings from the mysterious pouch, watching each sprout twist upward with uncanny speed, green turning gold beneath dawn and dusk, as if touched by ancient magic. Rumors drifted into the valley. Travelers whispered of unrest beyond the snowy ridges, of villages stricken by storms and haunted by shadows with hollow voices. One day, a pair of wanderers arrived. Ellen, a sharp-eyed woman who bore a carved horn, and Rurik, her companion, a man marked by scars and kindness. They told stories of gods stirring, old bargains unraveling. Loss isn't unique to Reynafjell, Ellen explained, seated by the new hearth. It crosses lands and hearts. Some say the world itself mourns, and every dream runs thin as ice. As night deepened, Hrothgar shared the riddle, the journey across the bone path, Hell's realm, and the return of hope. Ellen listened, her gaze never wavering, then offered her horn, a vessel she claimed could call souls from any border if the need was great and the heart was true. Svanna felt the air shiver. If our story heals us, could it heal others? Gertrude, once more keeper of guidance, nodded. Stories shape fate, when spoken, when believed. The magic is not in the tale, but in its sharing. If other villages suffer, you may need to walk the world and help them remember hope. So the saga compelled new action. Hrothgar, Svanna, Vilmer, Ellen, and Rurik formed a band and set out, guided by the seeds and the horns, toward villages drenched in sorrow. At each, they listened first, hearing each community's own story, honoring their grief and anger, letting silence birth trust. They planted seeds where hope was needed most. In some places, the shoots failed. In others, they thrived, weaving gold and green among ruins or loneliness. Sometimes, the horns summoned the memory of those who had been lost, letting a father forgive, letting a widow find rest. Sometimes, all they could do was stay, sharing the song whispered by the fox in the dawn. With every journey, Hrothgar's spirit deepened, his pain less blinding, his memories more precious. Svanna's wisdom grew, her laughter returned in ripples. Vilmer, once halting and afraid, became a keeper of names and stories, giving each lost soul a place in Reynafjell's ever-growing song. They did not become heroes of legend. They became healers, wanderers, and weavers of fate, bound by the truth that loss doesn't vanish, but in being shared, it makes room for hope. By autumn's return, Reynafjell's name was spoken with reverence across the north, and in every hall, by every fire, someone was telling a story. Sometimes it was theirs. Sometimes it was a new tale so fierce and gentle that the gods paused to listen and dared to dream of what mortals could become when they chose each other over the darkness. Winter circled back, deep and blue, its arrival gentler than the year before. Reynafjell brimmed with voices, pilgrims seeking healing, children weaving new songs, elders telling tales by the flames. Hrothgar often walked the paths carved by story and loss, pausing to listen to the roots growing stronger beneath the old ash trees. One evening, the valley awoke to the howl of wolves. Vilmer, now at ease among the wild, greeted them with gifts. The wolves carried news from distant places. A great hall in the east had fallen silent, its people trapped by grief after the river swept their kin away. A forest village had survived fire, but lost faith in each other. Svanna gathered the band and said, "We must go again. Each time sorrow finds a home, so must we bring our hope." Gertrude offered 3 runes, one for memory, one for courage, one for forgiveness. Ellen blew her horn, its echoes crossing mountains. Rurik packed provisions and called to the foxes and crows, the watchers and messengers of fate. Together, they journeyed by moon and snow. They sat with survivors in the ruins, asked about the names no one spoke, shared the tale of Reynafjell, how loss could bend but not break, how hope could germinate even in frozen ground. Hrother watched as each community responded in its own way. Some resisted, fearful of disappointment. Others clung to every word, hearts opening wide. Where the runes were accepted, a hearth was rebuilt, a child sang again, and the valleys slowly healed. In a forgotten village swallowed by night, Svanna found an old woman mourning her son beside a gnarled tree. Svanna told her about the riddle in Hell's realm, how sometimes only naming what hurts brings peace. The woman pressed her palm to the earth and whispered her sorrow, and as the dawn broke, new green pushed up through the frost, cold but alive. Rurik carved a ring of stones, each for a wound, a joy, or a sacrifice. Pilgrims added to the ring, marking it with signs unique to their own sagas. In every place, the band left seeds from the pouch that had started it all. Years passed. Reynafjell became a beacon not for warriors or conquerors, but for those who lost and found again. The gods, it was said, visited in the form of animals or fate-touched strangers, bringing small gifts, a blue feather, a bolt of lightning, a whispered promise carried on the northern lights. And when Hrother grew old, he stood at the edge of the forest after snowfall, hearing the world hum with thousands of stories begun in sorrow, but ending in light. He knew, at last, that the saga was not just his. It belonged to all who dared to move through shadow, carrying hope toward a dawn unseen. And Reynafjell, forever bright with the memory of loss and the miracle of resilience, sang that truth in every voice. As the cycle of seasons continued, Reynafjell's name traveled further than its icy ridges. The valley became a meeting place for those seeking solace, wisdom, or simple companionship. Travelers brought silks and salt, ancient songs, and old wounds. Some came in search of the fox amulet's legend, others for the tale of the three-eyed wolf, and many just to sit by the fire and hear the saga's heart unfold. One frost-cold morning, a stranger arrived. Her hair was woven with gold and fern, her cloak thick with frost crystals. She spoke in riddles and carried a harp strung from the wood of Hell's realm. Her name was Solveig, and her music turned memory into sound, sad, soothing, and sometimes full of wild laughter. She asked Hrother to tell again how he solved Hell's riddle, how facing pain could begin a new world. As the hearth's light flickered, others joined, children, elders, newcomers. Each listener felt their burdens ease, their own stories stirring deep inside. Vilmer had grown now, keeper of village tales and a protector of lost spirits. Svanna led many to face wounds and questions, often guiding people through a simple ritual beneath the ash trees. Name what you've lost, and let it be remembered. Name what you still dream of, and let it be sown. Gertrude, older but more knowing than ever, taught runes to a circle of children, her wisdom bending the rules of fate gently in their favor. As the sagas overlapped, Reynafjell saw its seeds flourish, some gold, some green, some as red as dawn. Pilgrims left tokens at the circle of stones, traces of loves lost and found, of failures forgiven, of courage reborn. Each season, Solveig's harp gathered a new layer of meaning. Sometimes its strings hummed with sorrow, sometimes joy, sometimes the fierce ache of longing for what lay beyond the known land. Its music reminded all, mortals and gods alike, that the riddle of loss was never fully solved, but always carried, always sung, always shared. One night, lightning split the mountain peak, and a new star burned in the sky. The fox amulet appeared again, glowing, whole, hanging from a branch over the village. Hrother smiled, knowing that every end was another beginning, and every loss was a story ready to be remembered. And so, as long as Reynafjell stood and the saga's words found new lips, even the gods paused to listen, and every traveler who arrived found, if not what they sought, at least a place to rest, to heal, and to begin again. As years slipped quietly past, Reynafjell became legend, a place whispered in the flicker of northern lights and etched in the runes on wandering staff and shield. Hrother, his hair silver as frost, took to walking the edge of the valley at twilight. Occasionally, he would pause by the circle of stones, feeling the pulse of countless stories speaking through the ground. Visitors arrived in every season. Some sought advice, others brought offerings, a feather from a faraway bird, a hand-carved boat, a packet of seeds from lands where the sun never set. Most sought comfort for losses impossible to name. One storm-heavy night, a procession of lanterns wound into Reynafjell's heart, men and women from distant fjords carrying their own burdens and hopes. Among them was Ryda, a warrior with haunted eyes. When he told of the dream that drove him, a loved one lost in battle, a promise unfulfilled, the villagers listened with the patience of those who understood. Hrother placed his hand on Ryda's shoulder. Loss is a weight, but it makes us strong. Every promise made to the gone becomes a torch for the living. Svanna, gentle and fierce, led the new arrivals to the old ash where the fox amulet shone, and together they named their grief beneath Solveig's music. Winter gave way to a ride of spring, and Reynafjell's people gathered for the feast of remembering. Stories were spun into banners, children painted dreams on stones and trees, and elders shared the songs of both sorrow and survival. Vilmer, now a father himself, taught that recovery was not an end but a journey walked every day. At the edge of the gathering, Gertrude gazed at the horizon. The gods' watch, never finished with mortals who learn to love despite pain. Every new tale calls them closer, curious, humbled. In the heights above the valley, lightning played with the mountains, shaping new runes against stone. Hrother saw in the distance the three-eyed wolf, grown ancient but never gone, watching, blessing, always ready to lead a lost soul back towards hope. On nights when the aurora sang, Solveig's harp spilled laughter through every house. Fishermen and farmers, wanderers and warriors, sat in reverent hush, then danced beneath shooting stars, the saga's words rising in voices old and new. Time pressed onward. Some who'd found solace in Reynafjell moved on, taking the seeds of hope and rituals of remembrance to other places. The valley's saga grew with every departure, every return. As Hrother's steps slowed, he carved new runes beside the circle of stones, not to say goodbye, but to remind the living that every shadow held space for light. Let every loss forge its own beginning. He whispered to the wind, to the gods, to all who would listen when the world, yet again, felt cold. And so Reynafjell endured, not as a place untouched by grief, but as the very heart of resilience, where the lesson of loss was never forgotten, but forever sung, remaking the world one story at a time. With the passage of years, the valley of Reynafjell became a place where all paths converged. The story begun by Hrother and his kin echoed so far that strangers spoke it as prophecy, not simply memory. On the longest night, the festival of risen hope filled every house with warmth and music. Solveig and her harp became central, a living vessel of myth, her songs braiding together pain and renewal. Elders claimed the aurora borealis itself was a ribbon of the saga that circled both gods and mortals. Hrother and Svanna, now leaders in wisdom rather than might, opened their doors to anyone who needed solace. Gertrude, though ancient, appeared at every fireside to teach. Every wound handled gently becomes root and blossom. Children chased foxes along winding paths. Vilmer taught young and old how to build the circle of stones, marking names, dreams, losses, each stone a promise to remember and a shield against oblivion. Rurik and Ellen wandered further in old age, carrying the stories of Reynafjell to distant lands. Sometimes, a villager returned with a scrap of song from somewhere foreign, proof the saga was still growing. One morning after a storm, the fox amulet shone brighter than ever, reflecting sunrise in a pattern that appeared across every door and every heart. It was then the gods sent a final message, a shower of blue feathers, a gentle rain that healed all who stood in it. Prothere, now bent and slow, held his grandchildren close, telling the story of the riddle and the boundary crossed for hope. What you lose brings you together. What you remember brings you home. As the stars wheeled overhead, those gathered sang the saga in a chorus so strong the gods themselves smiled, resting at last, content that mortals had learned the art of forging light from the deepest night. Thus Reynafjell's tale endured beyond any one heart, outlasted every sorrow, and welcomed every end as the beginning of a new song. When the last great festival of spring faded, the cycle of seasons found Reynafjell at peace, its hills green, its streams resonant with ancient music. Prothere's hair was white, Svanna's eyes wise, and Vilmer's family grown to fill halls with laughter and memory. One dawn, as the mist danced over the earth, Solveig sat beneath the gleaming fox amulet and played a melody that was more than song. It was history, prophecy, and promise braided together. People paused their chores, children stopped their games, and the elders gathered in silent witness. The music was not only healing but transforming, knitting each soul to every other within the valley and beyond. Rumors reached Reynafjell of famine in the far north, of tribes at war in the east, and a winter that wouldn't break in the distant west. Prothere called his band together, their numbers now including 3 generations, knowing the lessons they'd learned must be shared once again. Instead of swords and shields, they took with them stories and seeds, runes for courage and memory, and Solveig's harp, its resonance calling even the most wounded hearts to hope. Their journey led them to villages riven by loss, places where silence had grown thicker than snow, where old faith seemed to have vanished. Wherever they traveled, Prothere and Svanna listened first. Sometimes, a simple memory, a lost daughter's lullaby, a father's joke, an ancestor's smile, was all a village needed to begin mending. In other places, rituals from Hell's realm proved vital. They led communities through naming what hurt most, sowing seeds for the living and the gone. Vilmer led games among the children of villages too long silent, teaching them that every spoken story was a kind of healing. Solveig gathered the brokenhearted and turned their stories into song, music weaving grief and hope until both became part of the same thread. The gods, moved once more by mortals who worked for nothing but the return of light, sent signs both subtle and bright. Gentle rains after drought, a dream of green fields to a despairing chieftain, a visiting spirit in the form of a fox or wolf, who left footprints in new snow. Everywhere Reynafjell's pilgrims went, they left behind more than healing. They created circles of stones, planted seeds that shimmered gold and green, sang new sagas that gradually joined the old. After years of wandering, the travelers returned home with the first snow. Prothere, his steps slow but purposeful, knelt at the circle of stones and whispered, "Loss does not end. It asks to be remembered, shared, and grown from." So the valley's life continued. Each year brought new faces, new wounds, new hope. The saga never ended. It became the soil in which all grew, a harmony sung in Solveig's harp, carried in the laughter of children, and marked in the wisdom of elders. Reynafjell had become not a place free of sorrow, but a place where sorrow shaped every joy, every dawn, every journey home. And as the fox amulet gleamed into twilight, the stars listened, shaping their own new stories, waiting for the next heart to break and dare to heal. So time moved as quiet and steady as the mountain streams, and Reynafjell's legacy traveled wherever hope was needed. More than once, Prothere welcomed a stranger bearing signs of distant hardship, a weathered rune, a scrap of Solveig's melody, or seeds flowering in unexpected places. In long evenings, village folk circled the central hearth. New stories joined the old. A child who found her lost brother through a trail of fox tracks. A fisherman who cast his nets not only for herring, but for forgotten dreams, pulling up memories that made his neighbors weep and sing. The music of healing braided into every feast day and every quiet night, and those who had once come for solace now stayed to teach. Svanna became Reynafjell's sage. She taught that wounds did not vanish but changed shape, that every memory, bright or sorrowful, could be planted beside the hearth and watched over with patience. Vilmer organized annual games of remembrance, laughter and tears equally honored, and new circles of stones cropped up not only in the valley, but in faraway fjords and atop lonely hills. Solveig's fame spread, yet she never left Reynafjell for long. Her harp grew legendary, for it was said that its wood, harvested from rites in Hell's realm, never needed tuning. The music always matched the mood, echoing loss when grief was thick, joy when hope returned, and quiet patience in the deep stretches between. One clear night, the fox amulet glimmered with a sudden pulse, echoed by thousands of stars. Hrother understood. The gods witnessed these fragile victories and wove them into their own lore. No longer distant, the old powers sent dreams and small miracles, a healing rain here, a gentle animal there, to those learning Reynafjell's tale by heart. As Hrother grew very old, he wondered what would remain after his own winter ended. He needn't have worried. Children already knew the stories, running beneath golden leaf trees, tracing the runes he had carved and the footprints of fox and wolf. Elders visited, carrying tokens for the stone circle, and everywhere the saga was tended like fire in garden. When Hrother's final day came, all Reynafjell gathered beneath the aurora. Stories flowed like rivers around the circle, and Solveig played her harp with hands both gentle and resolute. Loss is memory, memory is hope, she sang, and old and young joined in until their voices seemed to wrap the valley and even the stars in warmth. After that, Reynafjell knew that its greatest strength was in the binding, a wound named, a story shared, a hope seated in unlikely ground. New heroes rose, but all knew that their real strength was this. Whenever pain or sorrow returned, Reynafjell's saga offered the path forward, a road carved out of heartache and leading always to the dawn. And so it was and would be, wherever hearts were broken and mended, wherever loss called out for love, wherever myth reminded the living how to begin again. As new generations grew beneath the watchful pines, Reynafjell became more than a village, it became a promise. Children learned to carry both joy and sorrow lightly, threading stories into their woven belts and painted runes. Elders gathered every solstice, lighting fires that burned through the long twilight, telling of Hrother's boundary crossing, Svanna's wisdom, Vilmer's laughter, and Solveig's harp that united the lost and the found. Pilgrims continued to come from every direction, bearing burdens and questions. Some arrived silent and left singing. Others came weeping and learned, slowly, how to smile. They built new stone rings and buried their own amulets beside the fox's gleam. They found, in the valley's air, the secret of resilience, not forgetting pain, but turning it outward so it could be shared and tended. Sometimes, those of Reynafjell ventured out themselves, answering calls for comfort in times of war, famine, or grief. The story changed in each retelling but never lost its truth. That sorrow, named openly and remembered, had the power to transform even the hardest ground into fields of light. Solveig's harp survived her, entrusted to the youngest child of her line, its music always echoing the saga's heart. Time turned round and round, and the gods, sometimes unseen, sent signs, foxes that guided wanderers through mist, gentle winds that encouraged growth where fields had been barren, banners of aurora that soothed the sleepless. Years passed into decades. Reynafjell's banner hung in great halls across the north, its runes spelling out what every soul came to know. Loss is not an ending, but a thread through which every beginning is woven. Stories became healing, and healing became tradition, until the saga joined the ancient roots of the world, sung not just in Reynafjell, but in every place where hope was needed. One final winter arrived with deep, silent snow. Svanna, now the valley's matriarch, tended the central fire and watched as her youngest grandchild danced with foxes in the pale dawn. She smiled, knowing that the story lived in each gesture of kindness, every forgiveness offered, every hand held in the darkness. As long as the stones remained and the fox amulet gleamed, there would always be a hearth here for the weary, and a song for those learning to remember and begin again. And Reynafjell, cradled by pines and stars, endured, the heart of sorrow and hope intertwined, the saga eternal, asking only one thing from every soul who entered: share what hurts, sing for what heals, let love stitch every wound into a new dawn. With each passing season, Reynafjell's legacy intertwined deeper into the tapestry of the North. Its memory endured not in monuments of stone, but in every gentle tradition. The planting of seeds each spring to honor the gone, the naming of grief at the solstice so it might transform into resolve, the circle of stories sung where the aurora brushed the peaks. Young people took to the wilds beyond the valley, carrying with them bits of the saga, a painted stone, a line of Solveig's song, a blessing whispered over the fox amulet. In distant places, strangers recognized them by the quiet way they listened, by the patience with which they helped others name and carry burdens. Reynafjell became an idea more than a place, a way of mending that echoed wherever sorrow lingered and hope dared to take root. The gods themselves, sometimes embodied in the cries of ravens or the patterns of stars, returned to the valley again and again. Sometimes they came as travelers, indistinguishable save for the glint in their eye or the weight of wisdom in their voice. Sometimes they came in dreams, reminding the living that the journey of healing was never truly completed. Days of peril still visited Reynafjell, a flood that nearly swept the valley, an illness that silenced laughter for months. But each time, the stories acted as refuge and balm. Even in the hardest moments, someone would find their way to the circle of stones and begin anew. Let us remember. Name what we've lost. Let us sow the seeds. Children grew up hearing that saga and lullabies, learning that tears were nothing to be ashamed of, that each dawn carried all the heartbreak and all the possibility of every day before. In faraway places, those who had touched the valley's lessons wrote new runes, invented new rituals, and passed on the memory, even to lands that had never known pine, snow, or the northern lights. As years turned towards centuries, those who led, Svanna's descendants and Vilmer's grandchildren, became stewards not only of Reynafjell, but of every corner where hope sprang from heartache. The circle of stones expanded, each new name a beacon and a longing. The saga every person carried now belonged to all. At twilight, elders sometimes gathered beneath the fox amulet, its glow unchanged after all these years. They said that as long as the aurora danced, as long as the fox and the wolf watched, as long as one child dared to ask, what happened next, Reynafjell's saga would endure, not as a tale finished, but as a seed sown in every soul, wherever the world searched for new beginnings. And in the hush before every dawn, across valleys and mountaintops, that song of sorrow braided through hope rose quiet and unbreakable, a promise carved into the roots of the world, a home as wide as the heart, as lasting as love itself. And so, long after the first footprints faded and the names of founders became gentle echoes, Reynafjell thrived as myth and memory. The valley's winds, once heavy with grief, now danced freely with laughter and quiet strength. All who came, whether seeking peace, answers, or simply belonging, found a place among the stones and stories. Within every home, the custom of lighting a candle at dusk persisted. This ritual, begun in the shadow of sorrow, had become a greeting to the departed and the living alike, a simple flame, fragile yet constant, declaring, "You are not forgotten. You are carried forward." Parents and grandparents retold the founding saga nightly, blending ancient details with the new, so that Reynafjell's truth was never static, but alive in every retelling. Solveig's harp rested in the main hall, honored and cared for by generations. In its silent strings, villagers claimed they sometimes heard the faint music of those lost, voices soft yet hopeful, guiding them through trials. Children practiced on smaller harps, their melodies binding them to the valley's past and its promise of healing. Travelers who reached Reynafjell didn't always stay long. Some left with runes carved on walking sticks, some with seeds to plant in foreign ground. Others simply took the quiet understanding that sorrow was universal, but the way through it could be learned, shared, and gifted on. At the circle of stones, now vast and sprawling, New rituals joined the old. Songs for forgiveness, stones painted with dreams unspoken, bundles left for foxes. Every act a testament to resilience and memory. The valley itself became holy to some, a pilgrimage destination for those seeking comfort or transformation. In every generation, there arose new storytellers, new sages, new bands willing to journey beyond Reynafjell's boundaries, to lands torn by war, villages bereft of hope, cities where loss felt absolute. Everywhere they traveled, they repeated the lesson learned so long ago: name what you miss, plant what you hope, carry each loss openly, trust in the power of healing. So Reynafjell Saga became an inheritance wider than blood, a philosophy of love, forgiveness, and rebirth passed onward. Even in the farthest reaches, at the edge of northern ice or the heart of southern fields, there could always be found a circle of stones, a fox amulet, the glimmer of aurora, or a simple light glowing at dusk. Evidence that the story survived and grew, shaping the world beyond grief. And thus, loss never defeated the valley nor the people who loved it. Instead, it gave the world the wisdom to endure, the courage to begin again, and the understanding that every ending carried the seed of another story. A truth alive as the pine and the wind, as persistent as the stars above, and as the decades became centuries, Reynafjell's saga outlasted memory and mingled with myth itself. Folktales told around northern hearths, far from the original valley, always bore some echo of Hrothgar's journey, of Svanna's wisdom, of Vilmer's unyielding hope. Generations passed, babies named for the old heroes, elders blessing new ventures with the story's ancient words. At the edge of the world, in places where the aurora burned and the mountains threw blue shadows across quiet fields, the story persisted, changing to fit new voices and times. Stone circles appeared in unlikely lands, marking grief, offering reconciliation, promising that any loss could nurture life. In Reynafjell itself, every year at first thaw, the whole valley gathered among blooming seedlings, repeating together the promise: from sorrow, we grow. From loss, we heal. We carry the song and light it anew. It was tradition, but also truth, a guide for each hard season and uncertain future. The fox and wolf, those old bringers of fate, remained a blessing and a warning. Sometimes they were seen at dawn, their tracks winding toward distant travelers, suggesting the old wisdom that every journey began with farewell and ended with a welcome. The legacy of the valley spread quietly, in every hearthside chant and every whispered hope, in every story sent with the wind. Reynafjell persisted whenever people chose memory over bitterness, love over abandonment, kindness over silence. And thus, the saga, long, winding, and ever unfinished, remained a gift to the restless, the grieving, and the brave. It taught that every heartache could find purpose, every wound could teach gentleness, every hope could outlive the dark. So long as children ran under northern lights and foxes watched from the shadows, so long as stones marked names and candles were lit at dusk, the wisdom of Reynafjell endured. Sorrow and love flowed together at the root of the world, singing to all who dared to listen, to all who chose to begin again. From time to time, the world itself seemed to pause, as if remembering the old saga whispered beneath the stars of Reynafjell. So deeply had its story crept into the hearts of travelers that distant lands turned their faces north whenever the aurora bloomed, hoping for a brief connection with the valley's gentle legacy. In Reynafjell, elders marked the passage of years with new rituals. On the anniversary of the first riddle's answer, when Hrothgar named hope as the end to sorrow, villagers wrote messages on strips of cloth, tying them to the branches above the fox amulet. Each message was a wish or a promise. I will remember. I will help. I forgive. When the wind carried these scraps away, they believed their hopes traveled with it, seeking new souls to nurture. Young storytellers learned to change the saga to fit each listener. Sometimes it was a tale of lovers separated by death and reunited by memory. Sometimes of strangers binding wounds with kindness. Sometimes of the gods themselves learning humility from mortal patience. Every retelling aided healing. Every new verse proved that loss, when faced, always opened new paths. The valley's circle of stones became a place for great gatherings. Visitors from every direction brought stones and dreams, some with markings in languages never heard before, others as smooth and silent as secrets. Each stone, once placed, became part of Reynafjell, a lasting promise, echoing underfoot with every step. Throughout the land, those who had never set foot in the valley still found its comfort. They wove Reynafjell's wisdom into lullabies, built circles of painted stones in city parks, spent nights around modest fires naming what hurt and planting what might someday heal. The story became a quiet revolution, a movement of hearts learning patience and courage, emboldened to create hope from what had once seemed only despair. At last, when the stars aligned in a pattern never seen before, a child born in Reynafjell dreamed that the valley reached beyond mountains and sea, a single, gentle light calling all suffering souls home. Wherever kindness meets grief, she said upon waking, Reynafjell lives. And so it was. The valley's saga, begun in ashes, shaped by sorrow, made immortal by resilience, became not simply history but a guide for living. Loss remained, of course, and pain visited every home. Yet with each telling, every stone placed, every song sung, every candle lit, the world grew larger, softer, and more certain that even the deepest wound could be transformed by the story and by love. For as long as tales were spoken, as long as the aurora brightened dusk, Reynafjell endured, a home for all who lost, a beacon for all who hoped, a promise that the hardest nights and bravest hearts would always find the dawn. And so Reynafjell's legacy became endless, stretching across ages until no one living could remember a world without its tale. The saga, rooted in sorrow but flowering in connection, wove through every heart that came to listen. Homes in distant cities, snow-brushed hamlets, and windswept villages honored the old valley with their own circles of stones and nightly candles. Each place, no matter how far, echoed the call, "You are not alone in your loss. You belong to the story." As centuries passed, the amulet's legend fused with myth itself. Families passed down fox-shaped talismans as tokens of resilience. Elders wrote their names alongside those of Reynafjell's heroes before adding new stones to the ever-growing ring, marking not only grief but every lesson learned from it. Tales of the three-eyed wolf, the riddle of Hell's realm, and the melody of Solveig's harp became part of the language of solace, spoken fluently wherever comfort was needed. Children still asked, every solstice, what happened next? And always, there was something more. The saga aged with each telling, gaining new details. The fox sometimes spoke, the wolf shared dreams. New heroes arose to journey beyond the valley carrying hope, treating sorrow with gentle hands, returning always so the stones would bear witness. When calamity struck, a great storm, a freezing year, a loss that outmatched memory, people did not retreat from pain or silence. Instead, they gathered and named what hurt, inviting sorrow into the circle so it could transform. They knew, by Reynafjell's example, that those who faced loss together never faced it in vain. In some distant era, a great library arose at the foot of the valley, filled not just with books, but with stories and stones from every place the saga had traveled. Pilgrims read the ancient runes and added their tales to the record, knowing they contributed to something larger than themselves. The gods, now part of every story and every hope, sent portents less as warnings than as comfort. Rainbows after storms, brilliant auroras on the hardest nights, dreams that steered the lost toward new companions. Reynafjell remained not only as a valley but as a song in the world's heart, a guide for those who wandered, a lamp for those who mourned, a celebration for every spirit learning to begin again. No one outlived sorrow, but all learned, at last, how to carry it forward until it grew lighter, and its memory opened to forgiveness, compassion, and light. Even when the names of Hrothir and Svanna, Vilmer and Solveig faded from tongue and page, the story endured in every act of kindness, every circle of stones, every child lifted into mourning beneath the shining fox amulet. And so the saga of loss became the saga of life itself, an unbroken promise that every ending held new beginnings, and every tomorrow could be shaped by gentleness and hope. As the threads of time wove forward, Reynafjell lived on in legend, its name a whispered strength in the hearts of the grieving and the hopeful. The tale, carried by countless pilgrims, sung in 1,000 tongues, became a path traveled not by feet, but by memory and spirit. The valley, now more a symbol than a place, saw generations return to renew the circle of stones. No longer did loss isolate the wanderer. Instead, it became a bond. Strangers embraced like kin as new stones joined the old, each bearing witness to joys remembered and wounds transformed. Across the land, children learned the rites of naming sorrow and planting hope, their voices rising in Solveig's music, their laughter braided with lessons of resilience. Villages kept a piece of Reynafjell alive, an amulet, a painted rune, a melody, to remind them that their burdens could be shared and their stories always matter. When the world faced darkness, a winter too long, a night too bitter, the lights of Reynafjell shone out, not only from hearths but from every hand offered in comfort. Elders counseled forgiveness. Youths championed new beginnings. The gods themselves lingered in dreams, gentle in their reminders that love was the truest legacy in sorrow, the surest soil for hope. Time drifted ever onward, but in the heart of every tale told, in every stone placed, candle lit, or song sung, Reynafjell endured. Its saga was not merely memory, but the living promise that wherever loss and longing dwelled, healing and belonging would surely follow. And in every dawn, beneath every aurora, the world listened, its story renewed, its hope unbroken, forever awaiting the next voice to sing and the next heart to begin again. As history became legend, the world changed around Reynafjell. The valley, once sheltered by great pines and cradled in silence, hummed with visitors from lands as distant as memory itself. Yet with every new arrival, its soul remained the same, woven of sorrow and love so deep that neither could exist without the other. A new generation rose to guide Reynafjell's hearth. Inga, descended from Svanna, carried wisdom like a light. Her eyes held storms and sun, and she listened to every story, knowing each wound could one day be named and healed. Beside her stood Eirik, Vilmer's grandson, a gentle giant whose laughter bent even the hardest tears. They kept the rituals, the naming of loss, the planting of hope, the circle of stones ever expanding to welcome new truths. But the world had grown louder, and challenges came swifter than before. Messages reached Reynafjell of a city gripped by forgetting, not just of sorrow, but of kindness and memory itself. People felt alone, even when surrounded. They failed to remember the names of the lost, and each heartache felt endless. Inga knew what must be done. She gathered companions, singers, poets, quiet children who understood the valley's ways. Bearing fox-shaped talismans and bundles of seeds, they ventured into the fading city. There, instead of preaching, they listened, first to silence, then to questions, then finally to sorrow. The city's elders, moved by gentle words and music, began to recall their first love, a lost sibling, a sacrifice at dawn. Tears fell, and the fear of remembering slowly loosened its grip. Inga's band taught the city how to build its own circle of stones, how to light candles for the gone, how to sing even in mourning. Eirik organized games and feasts, elevating laughter and unity. With each day, hope returned, a fragile shoot, then a blossoming tree. Story by story, memory by memory, the forgetting lifted, replaced by the steady heartbeat of belonging. By the time Inga and Eirik returned to Reynafjell, the city sent envoys to thank them. They carried seeds, songs, and promises. Each place would now share sorrow. Each ending would plant a beginning. Years passed into decades, and Reynafjell itself faced one final test. A winter like no other swept in. Winds so fierce they rattled the circle of stones. Snows so deep they buried paths and silenced song. Even the fox amulet grew dim, as if mourning with the valley. Inga called all who remained to the main hall. Her voice shook, but she spoke the truth the valley was built upon. We cannot banish every darkness, but we can face it together and carry hope through the night. Children pressed their palms to the circle, whispering names of the gone. Elders lit candles, their flames trembling yet steadfast. Outside, Eirik and his kin built great lanterns, setting them on the highest ridge to call the aurora, to remind the lost and the spirits that Reynafjell endured. Finally, as the storm raged, Solveig's harp was carried from its place and played in the darkness. The music, gentle and solemn, found its way to every ear, a reminder not of the absence, but of the promise that every hardship belonged to all. Miraculously, the aurora came. The sky blazed with green and gold, and as it did, the wind softened. The fox amulet reignited, shining so fiercely that its light lingered in every window, every heart. People emerged from homes, joined hands, and wept, from relief, from love, from knowing the saga had endured once more. When the thaw arrived, Reynafjell emerged stronger than ever. Circles of stones sparkled with new colors, children sang old and new songs, and the gods, ever watchful, left gifts, tracks in the snow, wild flowers, dreams of forgiveness and beginnings. Epilogue, the saga's gift. And so, the story completed its circle. Reynafjell, built first from ashes, shaped by suffering, renewed by every loss and every hope, became a legacy not just for its people, but for the world. The rituals and songs, the fox and the stones, the memory of courage and love, it traveled on in every heart ready to face sorrow and name it as the root of new life. Through forgotten cities and newborn villages, through wars and winters, the saga whispered, "Share what hurts, honor what heals, let loss become the ground from which light grows." In every dawn, on every face, Reynafjell's promise endured, endings as seeds, beginnings as blessings, and love, woven through the ages, forever lighting the way.